what has happened in the Middle East with the case of Yemen. Israelis attacked Yemen and killed the prime minister of Yemen together with his cabinet. And Houthis came out and said that this is a new sort of escalation. We're going to do the same to Israel. They have already attacked an Israeli tanker in the Red Sea. How can we understand the situation with Israeli mindset, with the way that they're thinking, the way that they're escalating the situation against Houthis? Because it's this was something new. We haven't seen this sort of. They attacked Iran. They wanted to assassinate the Iranian leadership. But the attack on Houthis, how is that going to influence the mindset in Yemen to fight against Israel?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the Houthis are not an Iranian proxy, as people used to say. Yemeni are independent, they are sovereign, and they have their own policies and their own behavior. And what we can see also is that Yemen is, in fact, the only country that assumed that accepted the idea of the responsibility to protect towards the Palestinians. And I have explained several times that the responsibility to protect is, in fact, something that was the principle of the United Nations that was adopted in 2005, based on the experience of the Rwanda war, where everybody witnessed the massacre or genocide that was happening there, but nobody dared or wanted to act. And the responsibility to protect, the principle of responsibility to protect, or R2P, this R2P principle was here to give an instrument for the international community to react to such situations. The R2P is based on three pillars, and that's what we can see on the UN website. For those who are interested, you can see the responsibility to protect and the three pillars. The first one is that every country, every state is responsible for the security and safety of its own citizens. Therefore, it has the responsibility to solve the problem inside of its own jurisdiction, if you want. The second pillar is the duty of the international community to assist a country in solving its domestic problem in order to protect its population. And this is, and when you, I continue. And then the third pillar is that when the two first pillars failed, there is an obligation of the international community to intervene in some way. That can be politically, that can be militarily, they can intervene in different ways. Now, if we look at the Palestinian case, Israel is responsible for protecting, very important, is responsible for protecting the Palestinians, because Israel is the occupying power that applies both to the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, obviously, but also in other places such as the Golan, for instance. As occupying power, Israel is responsible for the security of those people, of the occupied people. Now, in Gaza, it's obviously not the case, and obviously we have the use of weapons that are definitely not there to protect population, but on the contrary, to maximize the number of victims and all that. And so that means that the first pillar of the R2P was not failed with Israel and Palestine. The second pillar, the obligation of the international community to assist the government, is basically this is the whole instrumentarium of all the resolutions, UN resolutions and condemnations done by various international organizations including the International Court of Justice, for instance, that ruled that the occupation of the Palestinian territory, for instance, was illegal, and that the Israeli had to evacuate or to remove their resident, the Israeli resident, from those occupied territories. And all this second pillar failed also because the international community, I've seen the resolution, but it never made any effort to make those resolutions implemented by Israel. So now we are under the third pillar. And the third pillar is that you may have intervention. Now, the Yemeni decided to create an embargo, not an embargo, a blockade of Israel, in the Red Sea, up until Israel accepts a ceasefire, which is an absolutely legitimate objective, which is absolutely in accordance with international law. So all the actions of the Houthis in the Red Sea is perfectly legitimate and even legal, because their aim is not to destroy Israel. Their aim is to have a ceasefire, which is what the UN wanted. And so it's absolutely in accordance. So the problem here is that no other Arab country, with the possible exception of Iran, but again, it's not an Arab country, by the way. But besides this thing, Iran, there are other issues that are obviously at stake. And when you had this, the various exchange of missiles and drones between Israel and Iran last year, or in April, then in October, and then or November, and early this year in June, this was not directly related to the Palestinian situation. In fact, it was more a way for Israel to distract from the Palestinian situation, and in a move to escalate the conflict. So we are in something slightly different with Iran. But the Houthi.
But Colonel Netanyahu, he feels that Iran, if they can do something with Iran, they can collapse the whole axis of resistance. They can just destroy.
Yes, I know, but because again, this is a little bit the same type of rhetoric that you have with Ukraine against Russia. The problem is that the Israeli leadership, as the Ukrainian leadership, by the way, they are trapped into their own narrative, and they have created a narrative based on God knows what, and God knows what. Sorry, and this is not based on facts. This is also the idea, and that's the reason why I said to start that the Houthis were not a proxy of Iran. They have an independent policy. It's very important. And probably even the Iranians didn't want the Houthi at the beginning to strike Israel as they did, because it would complicate the relationship with Iran. Because, as you said, Israel is considering Iran as the keystone of the whole axis of resistance, which is not exactly true.
Can we say, Colonel, sorry for interrupting, can we say the same thing about Hezbollah in Lebanon? Because it seems to me the same way that Hezbollah is getting support from Iran, but they are independent in their decisions.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. It would be totally wrong to say that the Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. This is something. This is a rhetoric of Israel. The Hezbollah was created after the Israeli invasion of South Lebanon in 1982. Hezbollah itself was formally created in 1985, and 3 years later. And we have seen in the various Israeli interventions in Lebanon that you have this network of tunnels and bunkers and strong points that were constructed. If you have an entity that wanted to attack Israel, They would not base on tunnels and things like this. You see what I mean? Those tunnels are obviously defensive structures. And that's what Israel wants to dismantle, because now they claim that the South Lebanon belongs to Israel. And they want to have a buffer zone there. And the international community is playing ball with Israel on that, which is quite surprising. But the Hezbollah has never, the Hezbollah has no territorial claims. They are not Palestinians. They have no territorial claim towards Israel. I mean, there are a couple of, it's a few square meters or probably kilometers, a couple of square kilometers, the Shaba farms and a few spots along the border that Israel has in fact stolen on the Lebanese territory. And the problem is that the Lebanese government is too corrupt and too weak to resist to the Israelis, and that's the reason why Hezbollah exists. It's not because of Iran. It's a self-defense structure, because the southern part of Lebanon is a Shiite. They are Shiite Lebanese, and they defend themselves because and even in 1982 I said that's what prompted the creation of Hezbollah. The thing is that in 1982 the purpose of the Israeli invasion was the PLO. So if I can summarize extremely simply, they were Sunni, the Palestinian who are not Shiite. And instead of playing with those, because the Shia in southern Lebanon were not happy about the presence of PLO, because there were more than 1 million people there, and that was obviously a problem, a burden for the local economy, a burden for the local infrastructures and all that. So the Shia were not so happy to have the Palestinians. And when the Israelis entered Lebanon, the Shia were welcomed the Israelis, in fact. But the Israelis, instead of using that, or exploiting the tensions within Lebanon, they didn't use that. They say, well, they were all Arabs, and again we are with this always the same thing. The Israelis have no roots. I underline twice, no roots in the Middle East. The 2,000 years and all that, this is just a fantasy. They have no roots. They are all Europeans. They are all coming from the Central Europe. I mean, Ukraine, Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary. This is the origin of the Israeli state. And the IDF and all that. So these people didn't understand anything at the societal dynamics that existed. And for that reason, instead of using the Shia in Lebanon, they shot at them. And that's what created the Hezbollah. And since then, in fact, the Lebanese government has never been in a position to respond to Israel. The Hezbollah did that, and the reason why the Lebanon is not able to respond to Israel is because it's too corrupt. While in the Hezbollah, of course, they're all Shia. They are all motivated with the same spirit, and the corruption is not a problem in that context, and therefore that's why they were more effective against the Israelis than the Lebanese army. So, but it's a defensive organization. This has nothing to do with Iran. It happened that they got the support of Iran in the early 80s because Iran was Ayatollah Khomeini wanted to trigger a movement against, it was kind of an anti-colonialist movement, in fact, that he triggered, based more on religion than politics or political ideology. But it was that. Therefore, they got support from Iran. But it's not, Hezbollah is is a very Lebanese organization that has its own dynamics. They got support from Iran, but it's not. They don't apply the Iranian politics or policy. That's very important to. And with the Houthis, this is a very similar thing. They are very much independent. They have their own rationale and all that. Now, the Houthis, to come back to those, they have this quite effective and I would say quite impressive also action against Israel. And I say impressive because they were not deterred, not even by the Americans. You see, and that's something that is notable because this is obviously other Arab countries are afraid of the Americans. But the courage of the Houthi is, in my view, an example, definitely, because they have no problem with Israel, basically. This is just this question. They were fighting against the injustice and the the absence of law of Israel, the absence of respect of international law by Israel, and lawlessness of Israel, and that's the rationale of the Houthi. Now, obviously, the Israelis, instead of trying to find a solution in the Middle East, and we see that they signed agreements that they never respect. It happened with the Hezbollah last year in November when they signed the ceasefire with Hezbollah. They didn't respect any of the clause of this treaty. They signed under the pressure of the Americans in February a ceasefire with the Palestinians. They didn't respect either. So. And then, of course, when the Houthis came into the game, they didn't comply either. So the Israelis have a mentality that tends to escalate problem rather than to solve problems. And now they have apparently killed the prime minister of Yemen and a part of the ministers. And the Houthis are not afraid to escalate. And I think this is perfectly legitimate. You know, the Houthis have acted in the spirit of the international law, in reality. And they have done exactly what the Westerners do. I mean, when a policy of a country, when we don't like it, we apply embargoes or blockade or things like this. Think about Cuba, think about Venezuela, think about Iran. We do it. When others do it, we tend to qualify it as terrorism. You see? But in reality, the Houthis, well, today the word terrorism has lost all its value because everybody uses it just not to solve the problem, but to stigmatize somebody. Therefore, the Houthis have understood that, and that's why they have this policy of applying the R2P in their way, and that may lead to a situation where the Houthis may want legitimately, and they said they would do so, to kill the Netanyahu or the people of the cabinet. And they will probably do it at one point. I don't know. Again, apparently the Israelis have now stepped up their security measures for the government. Now they are afraid. You know, they are not courageous. The Israelis have never been a courageous people. It's easy to be courageous when you're stronger than the other. You see, that's the way. That's the courage that Israeli demonstrated. The Houthis have demonstrated. And remember when they attacked the Americans, and the Americans had to make an agreement with them because they noticed that the Houthis were determined. to continue the fight, and they were not deterred by the U.S. presence, despite all the U.S. attacks and things like this. So the Houthis are brave. These are brave people. They are ready to confront the international community, I mean the Western community, not the international, just the Western community, and obviously Israel, for the sake of justice. And I think that's something that is, in my view, commendable.